This is Worshiping God God's Way. My name is Steve Erspringer, and I'm glad that you're back and listening to this podcast. This podcast just talks about worshiping God, what it means to worship the Lord, how we perceive worship, and basically what we understand about worship, and we compare it to what God is thinking and what he says about worship, and we compare those things to see if we're lined up with him. And sometimes we are, and then there's times like, of course, in all Christianity and all theology, there are times when things aren't lined up with the Lord, and we, over a period of time, we learn to reassess and relearn some things and be open to what the Lord is saying. So that's what we're trying to accomplish here at Worshiping God God's Way. Well, we haven't been in the studio for several weeks, and during that time, I was on a vacation with our family and our relatives and kids and grandkids and all those things, and it was really amazing time together. But we are at a specific place where there were a lot of people who go to this area to vacation during the summer. And I was sitting out waiting for one of my kids to come out of the ice cream shop. And I'm sitting up against this wall and just taking all the views in. A lot of people walking around, cruise ships everywhere. And it was very active. And in the middle of this, a homeless man pushing a bicycle comes up and walks in front of me. And he starts to go through, opens up the trash can next to me and starts to go through the trash can. And he's actually opening and picking things out and eating out of that trash can. Now, I'm okay with that. I've seen that quite a bit. But in an area that we were in, that location that we were in, people were there in vacation mode. And there were a lot of kids, a lot of families. And man, when they walked by and they saw that guy eating out of the trash can, I could see the looks on some of the children's faces. They're frowning. Some of the parents were not happy that was taking place during their vacation time. I imagine they had something to say about it. But what happened was I was watching him, and I felt the Lord was saying, you need to give that guy some money. I had some money in my pants and my shorts. So I said, I've got a bunch of money in there. And I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I hesitated, and the next thing you know, he walks away. And I felt, I probably missed that opportunity. I should have done that. And I kind of rolled it off. I said, well, Lord, I should have done that. I know that, but I didn't. So I didn't do that. A few hours later, maybe 5 or 6 hours later, I was at another location in that area, and kind of a place that was kind of far away from a crowd. There weren't very many people. And I see the same man with his bicycle, and he's walking, trying to find something. And the Lord said, you need to go give him some money. And I reached into my pocket, and for whatever reason, I hesitated again, and I didn't do it. I made a choice not to do it. And hey, everybody probably, like me, has experienced that moment where the Lord tells you something, you know that it's right, but you hesitate, and you basically go into that mode of, no, I don't really need to do that. You start rationalizing, you start thinking real quickly, not long term, this is real fast. It's like there's reasons why I'm not going to do it. You don't feel like doing it, you don't have the energy to do it, or you just don't think it might be the right thing for that moment, so you talk yourself out of it. So I did that. And then later on, we got back from being on that vacation. The subject came up when I was talking to someone about pride and humility and the things that Christians take pride in. They like talking about being humble. They like talking about having humility, and sometimes they say things like even judging one another, and when they're talking about someone else, they go, well, that person doesn't have much humility, or that person has just too much pride to do that, or they're so prideful about what they're doing. And sometimes it just kind of floats around in that Christian circle like that. And then I was talking, and I thought, you know what, I had to tell him the story, because I walked into a moment where I was too proud to do it. I didn't have the sense of humility that was needed to reach into my pocket, grab whatever money I had in there, and just walk over and hand it to him. Now, I've done it before. I mean, I've dropping off food, fed people. I've done a lot of that, and it's not something that I wrestle with. But it came at a moment when I wasn't expecting to have to respond that way. So we talked about what it takes to live a life of humility, what that really means. And it is a day-to-day thing. It's a situation to situation. And if people practice and if they're prepared, they most likely will respond consistently, more like Jesus would have done. I would have probably reached in and given it quicker, faster, in a faster way, go right to it and give it to him and talk to him if I would have been practicing and prepared for that. Because in where we were vacationing, you just weren't expecting that. Let me tell you, everybody has all sorts of stuff going on. Most people there have boats and, all sorts of things, and they're there to have a good time, and they're not thinking, well, I'm going to have to help feed a hungry person. So that's probably where my mind was at. And so I didn't respond quickly. And it wasn't necessarily a thing that I was prideful about it. I didn't want to do because of my pride. But there was a moment there that I had to make a decision, and it could have been related to that. So I had to share that with that friend of mine. And it was funny because we started talking about worshiping God. Now, that's a topic that I always get into for some reason. Even when I'm not looking for that, it always seems to pop up. But I started talking about the idea of when God pulls your attention and he wants you to worship him, and then you hesitate. And if it's pride or if it's just a little bit of, I'm not sure if I can do this right now, there's a little bit of that thing going on. And sometimes God comes to people and says, you need to worship me right now, and they just do it. But other times, people can talk to you about worship. They can talk to me about worshiping God. But when it comes down to really doing it, they hesitate. Just like I hesitated giving that offering. And that's really what it would have been if I would have given the man that money. It would have been an offering to him. It would have been something I gave him as a gift. And worship is the same thing. Worship is an offering. It's a gift. It's something very personal that God requires of us. Yet we hear him, we see him, we activate our faith in him, and we're actually thinking about all the things we do within our Christian lives, and we know what those things are. But when it comes to worship, we hesitate. We will say, yes, I know that's what it is. I know that bowing down is worshiping God. And then the word comes out, but I don't. Or, but I can't. Or, I don't feel right about it. I can't quite get myself to do that. And a lot of people will preach and teach and go to worship things, and they'll never require anyone to worship. So they just kind of eliminate the real idea behind it. It was almost like the Lord said, well, if you want to be a servant, you want to feed others, you need to reach in your pocket and you need to hand that money to that man. If you want to be the person who ministers to people, you are going to physically have to do something so that happens. So when God says to us in private moments, or even in public places, if you feel the Lord saying to you, you need to worship me, he's really asking you to physically do it. He's not, I could have just sat next to that trash can like I did and thought about it. I thought about giving him $20. I thought about buying him some food and bringing it over and giving it to him. I thought about it, but I didn't actually do it. When God tells us to worship and he acts and he wants us to respond, he's really wanting the action. He wants us to really do it. But we do all the time. This happens in every place that I've ever been. Talking to so many people, they will not go the next step. They will say yes, but no. We are Christians who say yes, but no. Lord, yes, I get it, but no, I won't do it. No, that can't be right. You say, in my mind, it's okay. And I'm just thinking about, I feel it. I feel like I'm worshiping, but I'm not going to do it because that can't be what you mean, God. Why would you want me to bow myself down on the ground and worship you? That's not culturally correct. That's what you're thinking. But what's causing the block is humility. What's causing that block from someone doing that is pride. It's religious pride. And religious pride is very, very tough to get to. It's hard to touch that word, religious pride, because they have a lot of protective agencies around it. They have things of avoiding it, saying certain phrases that make them sound religiously right, but they're not right, but they won't do the things God wants them to do, but they're religious. And when Jesus, he talks about that when he says, hey, you guys preach, words, and you say things and you call them the commandments of God, but they're not. They're your traditions. They're traditions. They're things you do, but you're calling them the commandments of God. And because of that, because you have that mixed up, because your traditions have replaced the commandments, you don't have any power. You'll go through your life walking around looking religious, sounding religious, playing religiously, singing religiously, preaching religiously, but there's no power to it. And if you say there is power, most likely you're making it up to suit your own level of spirituality. You have to understand this, and this is really important. When God says something, he says it with a purpose behind it. When Jesus was talking about worshiping like God wanted people to worship, I'm talking about John 4, of course, when God's telling people that he's looking for worshipers, there's a reason behind that. He's not looking for religion. He's not looking for thoughts. He's not looking for things that we just go out and serve and do. And that's not what he's talking about in John 4. He's talking about literally bowing down on your face when that moment arrives. Like the person by the trash can on the vacation day. That person arrived. I wasn't expecting that man to walk by and start digging through a trash can in front of me. But when he arrived, I was called upon to do something. And I rejected that call. I said no. In my mind, I didn't use the word no, but my actions were no. So, and the Lord gave me another chance. The guy showed up again, and it was almost like the Lord was saying to me, look, here's your chance. Take it all and give it to him. And I said no. And so when it comes to worshiping God, God is speaking to you. He's telling you what those words are. He's talking to you about being a worshiper who actually worships. He's telling you, as you are listening to this podcast, that you need to become a worshiper where you are. And he's not asking for you just to think about being one. He's not asking you to sing about being one or to preach to someone about being one. He's asking you to become one. And if that is a problem, then you have to look at yourself and say, why am I hesitating? Why did I hesitate to give that man $20? Why did I do that? You have to ask yourself. It's okay to ask yourself that question. I wasn't ashamed to tell that friend that I was talking to of the situation. I wasn't ashamed to say, hey, I blew that. I should have given that guy $100. What's the big deal? What's $100? Who cares? Give it to the person. I wasn't afraid to say that. And I didn't walk away guilty because I didn't do it, but I did recognize that in my mind, in my heart, within my humanity, what happened was I didn't do it. I just said no. People are saying no to worshiping God every day. The Lord's calling people out. Christians are probably at the top of the list, but maybe there's not a top, maybe there's just a big list. And God has a mind for them. He's craving for people. He looks for people. That means he, like Jesus said, he's looking throughout the earth for people. And he must be calling their names because he knows their names. So why wouldn't he be calling you by your name and saying, come and worship me right now? And if he does say that, if you do hear that, don't do what I did. Don't do that. Don't say no and then walk away, because a few hours later, you might hear the Lord again, and then you have to make another decision. It's better to say it the first time. Say yes the first time and bow down and worship him. You know that bowing is worship. You've already admitted that. You already know where in the Bible, all the scriptures that have talked about people worshiping God, either in the Old Testament or the New Testament. You know that experience is true, and you know that it's there. You need to get yourself to put forth the action. You need to make yourself do it. That's really what Christianity revolves around, hearing and doing. And it's not just limited to preaching or teaching or singing and the things that we've already experienced. Now God is saying to you, now it's about you bowing before him and ministering to him as you worship him. And it can be in secret, it can be in public, that doesn't matter. The bottom line is, if we are to walk with Jesus and call ourselves worshipers, we have to come up with the cash. We have to reach down into our deep pockets and pull out the cash and give it. And that's metaphorical. You have to reach down into your spirit. You have to reach into who you are, and you have to worship God. You have to give yourself to it. You have to worship God God's way. That's what he's asking you to do. That's what he's asking me to do. And so that's what this podcast was about. Don't be embarrassed that you don't do it, but start doing it. Start giving back to the Lord in worship when you know he's there at that moment that he arrives and he's standing there. You need to bow yourself down and worship him. You need to worship God God's way.